Greetings, everybody, and welcome to a wonderful evening of readings with the Windfall Reading Series. I'm so glad you could all make it. My name is Wendy Beck, and I work at the Public Library here in Eugene, and I'm very excited that you can hear these wonderful readers today and you can participate in this program. Before we bring Henry Alley of the Lane Literary Guild up, I had just a couple quick things to announce. The first is that this includes at the end of the readings a question and answer moment, time that you can ask the readers questions, you can make comments, anything you want to know within reason is fair game. So please, by all means, you can do this a couple different ways. You're welcome to leave a question just below here in YouTube. That's totally fine. Just type in your question or your comment. You can also email me if you're feeling shy, and I'll put that up now. And that will also be down in the comment section in just a minute. But you can always email me and I will read your question anonymously, or if you want a nickname or if you want to include your name, that's fine. So it's great fun to get to hear what the authors are thinking and where their inspiration comes from. So I encourage you to ask questions or make comments. The other thing is I wanted to thank a couple groups that makes this this reading possible. The first is the Lane Literary Guild. Without the Lane Literary Guild, we would not be having this wonderful series, and deeply grateful for all the work they do, all the programs that they involve themselves with, and all the wonderful creative energy they bring to the greater Lane County area. So thank you so much. Also, thank you to the Friends of the Eugene Public Library. They are tireless in their fundraising and their volunteering. They do so many good things for the library, and they are lovely people to boot. So thank you so much to the Friends of the Eugene Public Library for making this and other programs possible. With those comments in mind, I would like to now bring Henry Alley to the fore. Excuse me, tongue-tied there. Hello, Henry.
Hello, Wendy. It's a privilege to be here tonight. I'm really looking forward to our reading. We have two wonderful writers here, Sheppard and Michael McGriff, that will be sharing their work with you in just a moment. I did want to say a few words about the Lane Literary Guild. It was founded back 1984, and I had the honor of being around when it was being put together by Bill Sweet and Ingrid Wendt, and some really wonderful founding members. I also want to say that over the years, the Lane Literary Guild has evolved in a variety of ways, and in the early 90s, it formed this Windfall Reading Series where we would put pairs of people together and they would share their work one after the other, and it's been a very, very strong series for a long period of time. We also have featured some prominent, all of our writers are prominent, but we've also presented some household names like William Stafford, for example, was one of our first readers, and we've also sponsored people like W.S. Merwin as well. This series eventually has come to the fore with our virtual programming, and we made a determination that we would continue with our tradition in this very special way, which we have all in a variety of manners enjoyed, certainly. I've been with the Guild since, as I said, 1984. I was president from 1985 to 1986, and then again as president from 2017 to 2018. So I've been a witness to all of the good things that it has been doing. So tonight we are going to begin with Sheppard, and I just want to say that both of these people are my friends, and it's really wonderful to be able to put forward their work tonight. And in Sheppard, who'll be reading from her creative nonfiction, I want to say how much I'm struck by the precision of her images and the power of them. For example, she writes, five stars is exceptional and rarely awarded. My best photo of a hummingbird, a male rufous, who posed on the feeder and let me take his picture. In this shot, he is sitting perfectly still with the red buds of a Japanese maple blurred fetchingly behind him. So we get that, just that really nice and precise, highly focused image. Also, she very strikingly can assemble apparently desperate parts that come together, disparate parts that come together. For example, the darker side of family life, along with this whole process and experience of birds and birding, which form a very interesting combination in her piece. We also have this background that shows her versatility. She writes novels and essays. I know she has one that's in process now, a novel. Her work has been published in Fourth Genre, The Writer, Baltimore Review, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, and Pushcart Prize 45. I'm sorry, yeah, 45, among others. Her prose, both fiction and nonfiction, is speculative. Speculative nonfiction being a subcategory of creative nonfiction defined by its unique relationship to fact. In a speculative essay, the writer respects facts and begins with them, but soon wanders off, following a line of thought and speculation of her own. Annie is a 2021 Oregon Literary Arts Career Fellow, a forthcoming resident of Jentel Artists Residency in Wyoming, and Vice President of the Lane Literary Guild. So, without further ado, let us hear the work of Annie Sheppard.
Thank you so much, Hank and Wendy, and thank you to the library and the Guild for hosting this series and for your commitment to writers and writing. It's a great honor to be here. So I started writing this essay when my dad was still alive, and I finished it after his death. It was originally published in Fourth Genre in 2019. It's called "We at Old Birds Welcome Messages from God, Even if Unverifiable." Perhaps you're not aware that the United States are home to 35 lake monsters. Most are of the ordinary Nessie type, but we also have webbed hominids, giant eel pigs, winged alligator snakes, aquatic lynxes, and a goat man. If you were so inclined, you could probably make a career out of investigating lake monsters, or you might devote your retirement to it. It would make a nice focus for one's waning years, I think, and it's good to have a purpose after all, and gardening is not for everyone. If lake monsters aren't your bag, there are plenty of alternatives. You might find it more rewarding to seek out UFO landing sites or lost gold mines or Sasquatches, but if you prefer fact over conjecture, consider missing species. Worldwide, there are over 1,200 species of animals and plants considered not extinct but lost. Myanmar, for example, has a missing pink-headed duck. Rumor has it that a small flock of pink-headed duck yet survives, paddling about in a remote, swampy area. If you were to sell all your worldly belongings and move to Myanmar in order to devote your remaining years to finding the missing pink-headed duck, you would not be the first person to do so. My retirement plan involves searching for the Lord God bird, which has been more or less missing since 1940 or 1944, depending upon whose claims may be believed. This is one of the hallmarks and charms of missing things. No one can quite agree on the facts of the matter. Another name for the Lord God bird is the ivory-billed woodpecker, though of course it's more fun to say Lord God bird. Its habitat is the hardwood swamps and pine forests of the southern U.S., forests once so vast they blanketed entire states. Though conservation efforts are now underway, only a few pockets of original forest remain. No one has taken a definitive photograph of the bird since 1938, but a few visitors to these forests in the intervening years have reported glimpses, usually fleeting, of a bird that appears to be the Lord God bird. Then, beginning in 2005, several reliable and otherwise trustworthy people, experienced birders, teams of ornithologists from universities like Cornell and Auburn, and a solitary scientist from the Naval Research Laboratory have reported with some certainty sightings of a bird that looks and sounds like the Lord God bird. Unfortunately for science, none of these otherwise reliable people have managed to collect a feather or droppings that would make it possible to verify the bird's existence with DNA testing. None have taken a photograph that can be said without doubt to be of an ivory-billed woodpecker. One searcher did capture a short, blurry, indeterminate video of a bird that might be the bird. Others have made audio recordings featuring what may or may not be the Lord God bird's signature double knock. Other experts have expressed doubt. They question the lack of concrete evidence. The pileated woodpecker, they say, is easily mistaken for the ivory bill, which, they add, is obviously extinct. Misidentifying a pileated woodpecker, these skeptics say, is an unfortunate but understandable mistake made possible by hope, which, as any scientist knows, introduces an element of uncertainty into every rational inquiry. Imagine being a member of one of those expert birding teams. Imagine that you yourself sighted the Lord God bird, that you are almost certain of it. You can describe its white rump and distinctive white wing patches visible only in flight. You know that the bird you saw was absolutely not a pileated woodpecker. You know your woodpeckers, and you would not have made such an amateurish error. You firmly believe that the bird you saw was an honest-to-God Lord God bird. So are the others who sighted the bird. One of them sat down after he saw it and cried. But is it possible that you just really, really wanted to have seen it? This keeps you awake. Though we tend to lose sight of the fact, it is not unheard of for the occasional missing species to be rediscovered. An entire taxonomy, the Lazarus taxon, has been created for species thought to be lost forever but found again. Some of these vanished species reappeared in the fossil record only to disappear once more, but others are living species. The Majorcan midwife toad, for example, was described from fossil remains in 1977. Living animals were found in 1979. In the present, upwards of 1,500 breeding pairs of Majorcan midwife toad exist, putting them in the vulnerable but not critically endangered category. Although one can hardly complain when a lost species is found, on the whole, I think it's preferable that our missing things stay missing. If we find these things definitively, we need no longer go looking for them, and we clearly need stuff to look for. This is a view I inherited from my father, who always favored things that were missing over things that were found. He kept an extensive dossier on Bigfoot, for example, yet never once spotted so much as a largest footprint. He once wrote an article about the Porterford meteorite, which was discovered in 1856 in the hills of Oregon's south coast and immediately lost again. Dad looked for and failed to find the lost Porterford meteorite for many years. His article was a detailed, map-riddled deduction of where, in many square miles of steep, brushy, inhospitable forest, the meteorite would most likely be found, based on all the places it wasn't. Too bad the Porterford meteorite turned out to be a hoax and took all the fun out. Dad was tenacious about looking for things and not finding them. He dragged my mother and us kids all over the Northwest in search of lost mines, prehistoric hunting sites, and ghost towns, which we almost never located with any certainty. The Lord God bird was not on Dad's radar, however. We lived in the wrong quadrant of the continent, for one thing, but we shepherds were simply more inclined to look down than up. Were there any birds at all in the state of Oregon? Any sapsuckers, any warblers, any goddamn chickadees? Did we look up at all? We did not. It is the duty of the younger generation to distinguish themselves from their parents. If one hasn't done so by midlife, it's time to get started. Accordingly, I began to look up in my 50s, and I discovered birds up there. Birds appear to be a fairly common midlife discovery. While one does come across a young birder now and then as a pursuit, birding seems to call almost preternaturally to the oldish. As time passes, I reckon, we are increasingly dogged by our own lurking mortality, and so need some kind of religion more than the young. And birding is one of those fields of inquiry that, no matter how rational its enthusiasts, manages to cross with some regularity into religious territory, even if unknowingly. Witness the awe, the uncertainty, the fleeting glimpses, the unverifiable sightings. Witness the name, Lord God bird. According to anecdote, the name arose from a shout, or perhaps a whisper, uttered by a fortunate birder upon glimpsing the bird. The bird is also sometimes called the good God bird for the same reason, and while it is possible that these names arose from a startled outcry of discovery rather than one of religious awe, we should not overlook the universal human habit of joining surprise with divinity. From Lord God to good God to holy fuck, we are unconsciously communicating with the divine whenever something awesome or awful catches us by surprise. Another way to say communicating with the divine, of course, is praying. According to the writer Sam Keene, modern birders can be viewed as unwitting members of an ancient cult of bird worshippers who believed that birds were messengers from God. Upon learning this, I immediately Googled ancient cult of bird worshippers, hoping it would be a real thing. It doesn't appear to be. The internet is aware of instances of bird worship in specific indigenous or historical populations, the worship of crow by the Inuit, for example, but does not have any knowledge of a substantial and cross-cultural cult of bird worshippers currently or formerly active on the planet. This is both a disappointment and a relief. I've joined the cult in spirit, however. I like the simplicity of their dogma. Birds are messengers from God, and you may do with that what you will. It's a religion I can tolerate. Wild birds don't age, as far as I can see. They are generally eaten before they have a chance to get old. The typical lifespan of a wild parrot is about 40 years, for example, whereas captive parrots regularly live 60 years or more, and a few live considerably longer. It is rumored that Winston Churchill's pet parrot is still alive at age 118, although it appears no one has tried very hard to confirm this. Like the Port Orford meteorite and the goat man of Lake Worth, Texas, Winston Churchill's pet parrot is just more fun as a rumor. For another view of aging, let's revisit my dad. I did this myself just last week. I arrived at the care facility bearing gifts, a sandwich bag containing 4 ginger cookies, homemade by me. Kevin, a caregiver, saw me come in. He's in his room, Kevin said. He's revving up, he added, which is both a warning and a routine occurrence in this facility. I knocked on Dad's door, which stood open. He was standing by his walker, wearing a button-up shirt, adult diapers, and nothing else. He looked up. He did not say, "Hello, kid," as he once did. He said, "I need help." He had tried to pull a clean diaper on over a used one, but he didn't realize this. He said, "I can't pull them up for some reason." I bent over. I told him to lift a foot. Okay, now the other foot. There was a time when I would have fetched Kevin and let him do the diaper work, but I've grown accustomed to helping Dad dress, undress, untangle. I'm used to his toothpick legs, his hairless pink testicles. Testicles hang low on old men. They sway. This is something I've learned. I got Dad squared away. 1 clean diaper, 1 shirt, 1 pair of shorts, 1 pair of sandals. The ordeal tired him. He lowered himself slowly into his chair. "You can't trust anyone here," he said. "What's happened now?" I asked. "Someone's been in my room. They've taken things." I asked him what things have been taken. "My photos," he said. The missing photos are in a blue binder. There are several dozen shots, black and white, arranged chronologically in plastic photo sleeves. The photo and the orderly arrangement are both Dad's work from an earlier, more organized time. He took them in the 1960s and developed them in his dark room, which he had converted from a closet. The subject in every photo is my mother, nude. Seated demurely in an antique rocking chair, nude. Reclined on a mid-century modern sofa, nude. Silhouetted against a curtained window, nude. She was 20-something, willing and beautiful, the way the young are beautiful, which I now feel is mostly just unweathered. Mom and Dad were married to each other at the time, and there's nothing inherently wrong with the photos, with Dad taking them or with Mom posing for them, except this. Mom and Dad divorced in 1975. Dad has been married to his second wife for 40 years. My stepmother takes her marriage seriously. She's not thrilled with these photos. And this, during a hospitalization last year, Dad invited 4 of his 5 daughters and stepdaughters on separate occasions to join him in bed. In the late 70s, Dad made sexual overtures to his stepdaughter, aged 13. He posed another daughter in a negligee and took pictures. To relax her inhibitions or maybe her scruples, he plied her with booze, which she dutifully drank. She was 16. On one of my earlier visits, I had found the binder in Dad's dresser drawer in the care facility. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for hearing aid batteries. When I next saw my mother, I asked her what she would like me to do, if anything, about the photos. "Please get them out of there," she said. I am the thief. I remind Dad of this. I reminded him of my sisters, and in case he had forgotten, I reminded him of his transgressions against them. "I don't know why I'm not being forgiven," Dad said. "Because you haven't apologized," I replied. "Other men have done worse things," he said. Dad will forget. He will continue looking for his photos and will continue not finding them. He will tell me someone has been in his room and has taken something. I will ask, what have they taken? He will say, my photos. Here's a little prayer for Dad. God help you. I am a birder. I'm a member of the birding community. Sometimes, but not reliably, I report my bird sightings on eBird.com, a citizen science website run by Cornell, the same university whose expert birding team may or may not have sighted the Lord God bird in 2005. On eBird, I report that I traveled on foot for 1 hour. I agree that my primary purpose was birding. I report that I traveled 1.5 miles. Birders cannot be expected to walk briskly, and I saw 15 American crows, 1 song sparrow, 6 common mergansers, 1 belted kingfisher, 40 tree swallows, 5 bush tits, and 4 cavorting ravens. I'm not actually allowed to insert the word cavorting with the ravens, but I can mention in the comment section that the ravens were cavorting, so long as I'm certain they were ravens and not crows. I'm not allowed to report that I saw a flock of crows in a fir tree that may have numbered as few as 10 or as many as 25 individual birds. I must choose a number and declare it with certainty. I'm not allowed to report that a hummingbird whizzed past my head, but I don't know whether Rufus or an Anna's. All I can report is the whizzing, and eBird does not find that helpful. It's a distinct sound, the whiz of a hummingbird, but it's not usually possible for a low skills birder like myself to identify the species based on the sound of whizzing alone. eBird does not approve of uncertainty. It does not accept reports like, I saw a bird I think was a wren tit, but you know wren tits, they don't always let you get a good look at them. eBird will gladly accept photographic evidence. eBird would love to see an unambiguous photo of an ivory-billed woodpecker. Recently, eBird introduced a feature that allows birders to rate each other's photos. 5 stars is exceptional and rarely awarded. My best photo is of a hummingbird, a male Rufus who posed on the feeder and let me take his picture. In this shot, he is sitting perfectly still with the red buds of a Japanese maple blurred fetchingly behind him. It is his eye, however, that is the exceptional feature. It looks human. My hummingbird is a walnut-sized bird with a long black bill and iridescent throat, we birders call his gorget, and tiny clawed feet, and he looks back at us humans in this one photo with a human eye. Someone, an anonymous birder, has awarded my photo 4 stars. It is just slightly out of focus, just barely, almost imperceptibly not quite sharp. So 4 stars instead of 5. While I agree that my photo deserves 4 stars and not 5, the relevance is not in the stars. The relevance is in the eye. A human eye looking out from the face of a bird does not make the bird look human. It makes the bird look numinous. It looks holy, like a messenger from God. I am a member of the birding community, but I'm also a member of the ancient cult of bird worshippers. We bird worshippers are less concerned with correct species identification and sharp focus. We are more concerned with messages from God. A citizen science website that someone should create, but not me, is Old Birds. This would be both a reporting site and a literary journal. Subjects sought by the editors of Old Birds: aging, dying, birds, and anything numinous. Artists, please submit. Contributors may be of any age, but Old Birds is not the home for your academic work. Your MFA is neither helpful nor a hindrance, but your indignation is welcome, as are your sleeplessness, your impatience, your demented parents, and your lack of speed. Your long hindsight will find a home here, as will how dumb you still feel, even now when you have been promised wisdom. We at Old Birds also welcome messages from God, even if unverifiable. One of the more endearing habits shared by birds and humans is the collecting of shiny objects, a thing crows and magpies are said to do. My own nest is lined with shiny objects, tarnished silver cups, and odd little mirrors and small luminous paintings, things I've come across while out in the world and carried home as treasure. The internet tells me that the question of birds collecting shiny objects has been asked by science, and it has been answered. The answer from science is that birds emphatically do not collect shiny objects. Corvids, the family to which crows and magpies belong, collect food mostly, and are even somewhat alarmed by shiny objects. Science speculates that if these birds are sometimes seen with shiny objects, it's because they want to be rid of them. But the myth of crows and magpies collecting shiny objects is much loved by us bird worshippers. We point to news of a young girl in Seattle who has befriended a flock of crows. Her crow friends bring the girl gifts, charms and beads and fragments of sea glass. We're happy to learn the story is true, and we do not thank science for shooting holes in our favorite metaphors, or for questioning the likelihood that lake monsters exist, or for telling us that our most poignant feelings are caused by brain chemicals, or that our blurry photos and fleeting glimpses are mere figments of irrational hope. We do not think science does humanity any favors when, in the name of rationality, it squashes all hope, especially the hope we need as we age, that we will somehow continue, that we are not slipping inexorably toward our own extinction. So, I hear you asking, if your hummingbird is a messenger from God, then what's the message? The ancient cult of bird worshippers does not have a priesthood or hierarchy, not even a reliably argumentative cadre of theologians. It only has laity, most of whom do not even know they are members of the cult, much less capable of translating messages from God. Still, this one seems pretty obvious, even to us laity. I see you. When Dad went looking for missing things, he took his family along, on trips to the mountains in search of Indian caves, to the high desert on arrowhead hunting expeditions, or into coastal forests, looking for the lost Porterford meteorite. He taught us how to navigate in the woods, how to read the cardinal directions on a cloudy day, and how to build a fire in the rain with only one match, in case we should ever be lost in the forest ourselves. He had fun. He drank Blitz beer through a silly straw, wore a rawhide hunting jacket with a fringe, and served up his mostly factual stories with a generous dollop of fiction. He did not have answers, as far as I can recall, for much of anything, but he had an admirable zest and enthusiasm for questions. And he took liberties with his daughters. He took things from us, innocence, trust, confidence, that were not his to take, and he has been so far more defensive about this than repentant. Dad's an old bird now, held in captivity well past his natural lifespan. He's tangled up in his diaper. He's weathered and hairless. He has, at best, a handful of rather grim years left to him. Science says that's all he has. One chance. You blew it. Too bad. But the Lazarus taxon says otherwise. The world itself says otherwise. In the roundness of the planet, in the tides and the seasons, in the infinite circularity of the water cycle, the world, the natural world, speaks a language more hopeful than the language of science. It says life is as resilient as it is beautiful. It says things come and they go and they come back again. They return. Some part of us knows this is true, or maybe we only hope it's true, that we return, that this one life is not our only chance, that we are seen, that, as the writer William Kenauer says, we are not here to just endure some meaningless crap until we're dead. The ancient cult of bird worshippers does not have a holy book or creed. We are disorganized, credulous, irrational, and hopeful. We don't know much, but we know enough to be thankful for missing things, for the Lord God bird and the pink-headed duck, for Bigfoot and innocence and all 35 American lake monsters, more or less. Though no one can quite agree on a head count, we are thankful because missing things give us something to look for. If we had a prayer longer than holy fuck, it might go like this. May our glimpses be fleeting and our photos blurry, and may we never prove a thing one way or another. Thank you very much for having me and for listening. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much, Annie, for your moving story and for all the richness of it. And we really appreciate you being here tonight. I would like to say before I introduce Michael that we have a literary bookstore here in town, the Tsunami Books, and we want to give it its due. There's the phone number. And the works that have been read tonight, you can investigate and see how available they are, and talk to the owner, Scott, if you have any particular requests. I especially enjoy special ordering from them because it's so quick, and you also have the opportunity sometimes of getting a discount. There is the phone number, and please consider them, especially since they have been so supportive of the Windfall and the Lane Literary Guild series. They have provided space for our critique groups, and they have also featured a variety of us that are members of the Lane Literary Guild when we have our book launches or we wish to feature our books. So having said all that, I also want to remind you that the River Road Reading Series, which the Lane Literary Guild sponsors, is going to be having a reading on Halloween, Sunday, October 31st, from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Again, this is through Zoom, and you can put the information River Road Reading Series into Google, and you can find the details there for linking on. We're going to have award-winning author Anne Roberts do a reading along with Eric Brahman, who's a poet, playwright, and theater maker, and also Jutta Donath, who is from former East Germany and holds a master's degree in German, and she is going to be reading, I believe, some poetry as well. So that will be a very interesting series on Sunday, the last Sunday of this month. All right, and now it's my great pleasure also to introduce Michael McGriff, who is our next reader, and he will be reading from his poetry. And I have known Michael a number of years and have been a fan of his books. I want to say in particular, he, in his poetry, not only creates a sense of images, but he also sends strong sense of creating a place, such as Coos Bay, for example. There's a poem that he's written on Coos Bay, which brings in all of its vibrancy and its particular detail forward for the reader. I also just want to read just a sample here of from his book Choke, where he describes the poem is called Mother Expanding from the Piano, the Light, the Whales, and the mother here is described this way: the light around my mother is the light of magnitude. It's as if winter in this memory, then cities of grief expand in each drop of rainwater, and my mother positions her hands. Just that sense of this parent bringing together this kind of luminous halo, which is so striking in the poem, and so those kinds of images are striking throughout his poetry. Also, we have his background as well, which tells us that he was born and raised in Coos Bay, Oregon, and his work centers exclusively on the concerns of rural American life. He is the author of 4 collections of poetry, most recently Eternal Sentences, which I believe is published by the University of Arkansas Press. We were just talking about that, and was selected by Billy Collins for the 2021 Miller Williams Poetry Prize. Yes, University of Arkansas Press. His other books include a translation of Thomas Transtromer's The Sorrow Gondola, Green Integer, 2010, and a collection of short stories, Our Secret Life in the Movies, published by A Strange Object in 2014, which was designated as the best book of 2014 by NPR and profiled on a weekend edition Sunday. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, Book Forum, The Believer, Poetry, American Poetry Review, and Poetry London. He lives and works in Moscow, Idaho, and can be found online at michaelmcgriff.com. So without further ado, it is a great pleasure to introduce Michael.
Thanks so much, Hank. It's my pleasure to be here. Absolutely. The last time I read for Windfall was in the late 90s alongside Amanda Copeland and George Hitchcock. And I believe I was invited to read by Eric Moeller, who then became my first publisher, all there in Eugene. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And thanks so much to the Literary Guild, to Windfall Reading Series, to the Public Library in Eugene, and to Annie Sheppard, whose essay is just what a great piece of writing. I'm just kind of stunned in the best possible way. I'm going to start my reading off by a poem not my own. It's a poem by a fabulous writer from Buffalo, New York, Noah Falk. He's written this book called Exclusions. It came out in 2020, really marking, I think, books in our new era, our new COVID and hopefully post-COVID era. It's just a fabulous book. It's called Exclusions, and every poem has a title that says poem excluding blank. So this poem is called Poem Excluding Gun Violence. Every morning begins with the saddest story ever told. The neighborhood kids pull triggers between gasps of laughter. Birds fall from the sky one at a time, and we wake to someone's conclusion to a rhapsody, a trumpet cry of sirens. As far as tomorrow goes, it's too far away, but you will be there in the middle of trembling. We can say that much, tightening our belts, metal purring against our legs. We understand this may be our last day to speak of love, to choke on pistachios, on porches with old friends, or the girl with eyes so brown they could be countries scarred with the richest of soil. So it's by Noah Falk, just a fabulous, fabulous poet. The first poem I'll read for you is called Fire, and true to its title, it's me trying to put my mind around our recent fire season, which now in the West is year-round. Fire. It's grown now beyond acres or miles, beyond narrative. This rust light that chews shadows from the fields. Can there be an afterlife if the osprey have grown atonal or merely abstract? I think of the first time I sautéed a cow's tongue and felt, for whatever reason, invincible, like a compass. No book will do. All the records lie blank beneath the stylus. The tape measure is an empty, yellow ribbon I unspool along the length of the foundation. Someone who looks like my father holds the other end. What's it read? I say. His voice is like a mirror. It doesn't move, yet it comes toward me. A manuscript I've just finished is called Questions for the Interrogation, and it's a book-length poem, and every sentence is a question. It's the only structure in the book. Every sentence a question. I'll read 10 sections of this, and then I'll read some work from my new book. So, Questions for the Interrogation. Was that the sound of my brother getting arrested? Or was it the moon collecting its debts from the Jimson weed? Perhaps it was the surf throwing itself into the jetty, failing to strike a blue spark. Lovely ghost, is that you at the end of the driveway trying to convince the young deputy that a set of brass knuckles is only a paperweight? Or have I fallen asleep with the windows open, overhearing the thorn apples swap stories as the ocean shuffles its eternal deck of black cards in the last corner of summer? Was that my grandmother restringing her fiddle? Or were those alder branches scraping the downspout? Do the moths hold grudges against the wings of the moon? If it's true that ghosts don't shit, is it also true their jokes are terrible? Was it real when I heard the trees comparing their debts? Does the river wear gloves when it dismantles a foot? Why do I value the physics of a spark plug more than the mouth of a scholar? Is the fog on Blue Harbor jealous of gas and oil, mixed and burned into a trail of blue smoke? Was that a wild turkey accosting an old woman, or was that a man dancing with an ironing board? Shoveling this manure, why do I feel suddenly related to half the phone book? How is the fresh paint on the black hinge related to the crows stripping the tree of its cherries? What is a parabola, if not the arrogance of symmetry? And why do the cut halves of a sour apple spin in opposite directions on the butcher's block? Have you already discovered the walls are stuffed with straw and newspaper? Or are you still dancing to the radio, unplugged since 1941? Why is it today that all women see their dead sons in me the moment I slouch through a doorway? Where did the hidden star keep its sack of stripped bolts as it crept through the night? Why don't these canyons, painted hills, yell at me to hear their own voices? Did the sheep in Sweden get so lost they became the clouds my grandfather tried to remember? If I could keep scouring you with kerosene, will I reveal the face of a deer? How long is the equation between the moon and this handful of rice? Did I mention there are dead beetles in my new pack of smokes, that the bones in my hand have grown thin and blue as the first snows in the year of the rabbit? Was that an owl or bicycle thieves projected onto the side of our barn? Was that the back door or an old record hissing beyond its final track? Or was that the crunching of gravel just past the end of the pavement? Does the common rat support organized labor? Is the smoke hidden inside a box knot different than the smoke in a square knot? Do you remember how we drove to town to watch our father buy Red Wing boots with his first paycheck from the mill? How many rivers will refuse to vote in the primaries? Did the runoff from the upstream chrome plant turn the ferns orange as an eyelid in the October moonlight? Is the river deep enough to swim, even if it tucks a dark feather behind its ear? Is it trespassing if you find a cloud with its iron mouth pressed to the water? How often is a dead man's eye fitted to the milky head of a floating shad? Is the hatch a winged shape shaped by how we swim along the shore? Will it be trees or factories whose roots grow down into my grave? What's it called when a rope stretches 2 inches beyond its limit? Will my final thoughts reflect my pride over never using umbrellas, or will I see a new mountain rise up from the sea? Would I tire of crows if they finally wrote down their opaque theories of the evening sky? So that's the first kind of opening gambit, excuse me, from my most recent book that I've completed. And I'll finish by reading some poems from a book of mine that was just published, Eternal Sentences. I wrote this book as a sort of companion manuscript to those poems I just read. Every poem in this book uses only a single line that ends with period. So every line is a single sentence. There's no enjambed lines. Eternal Sentences. Emotion beneath the pond scum. I know how the moon got its black eye. I heard it happen last night. It transpired in the wind. Crows as pure as lies were involved. They factor into the wind's accent. My father throws a fouled spark plug in the mill pond, then another, and another. He cut a slit in the fence to get us here. It was like stepping through a gill. A catfish is more like a crow than anything else. It is carbureted. It runs rich. It throws a tail of blue smoke. Anyone worth half a shit can take one apart. He tells me the thistle holds milk in its eye, just the way a catfish does. What are you doing? I'm feeding the fish. He says, watch this. I smell oil and gas. He walks off toward the black shape of the wind. 1995. Today is like yesterday. The courthouse fills up. We wait to be called before the judge. We learn of each other's crimes. We answer questions. The judge laughs at a woman. She stole a 3-pack of boys' underwear from Kmart. The electrician left his girlfriend's kids in the back of his car. He had to make a quick deposit at the bank. He left the windows cracked, but not enough for a hand to get in. He was only gone 5 minutes. I drank too much and pissed against the bank's picture window. This was after my friend hanged himself. Maybe it was the same bank. Bodies became things they were never supposed to be. I agree to pick up trash on the side of the highway. I go back to work, moving boxes around in a walk-in freezer. Sometimes I turn out the lights and harmonize with the compressor. Someday we'll colonize the moon. I wonder if it will have pioneer graveyards filled with the names of children, the ones who died at birth or never grew old enough to speak. South Fork of Coos River. You ask a serious question and I ignore you. I can't stop thinking about lying on the dead grass back home, how the turkey vultures became parenthetical. When I got up, my shadow remained fastened to the ground. It must have felt like a pile of clothes warming on the rocks, right after you strip them off and throw yourself to the leeches. Elk in the field. When I was 6, the elk came. They left swirls of blue light where they rested. Their calls were thin old women blowing on cut grass. After they left, we took their places. We called the matted down grass a ghost nest. It stayed warm there for hours. The sun drank little bits of us. I remember the black teeth of one man. He split wood for our cedar fence. He told us everything we did was bad luck. He opened wide. He said, "How do you think I got this way?" 1987. The night runs up its tab. The creek's so low it barely complains. It smells like a burrow of dead snakes. Horseflies set up shop. The men call Reagan a broke-dick dog. They're poking at a fire with curtain rods. We burn trash in the yard. My grandmother drinks whiskey once a year. She considers the owls the broken teeth of the dead. Cousin. I called you cousin my whole life. It's confusing what you actually were. Blood gets that way, like salting the sky or debating who owns the moon. I wore the same jacket to your wedding and your funeral. On both occasions, the women looked older than they should. The same one refolded my pocket square. Each time she said, "You were too smart for such a mess." A sky full of sparrows poured from my chest. Mikey's in jail. They caught him on camera. They showed it on TV. He shouldered in the door at Gas Quick. He took a package of diapers. He took a log of Kodiak. He emptied his pockets. He left what he had on the counter. As he ran through the store, a freezer door opened. Small handprints flared up on the glass. The camera doesn't lie, the state will say. Mikey will say, it sure as hell don't. Sleeping beside the Alsea River in Central Oregon on the coast. In 2 more breaths, the river will change direction with the tide. The elk sharpen their craft of disregarding us. On the far shore, they are both memory and experience. The light makes me think of a clean ashtray on a windowsill. The wind undresses across the water. It has never lied about what it doesn't know. I'll read 2 more. Food stamps. She'd push the cart until there was an empty checkout line. I'll start over here. Excuse me. Food stamps. She'd push the cart until there was an empty checkout line to make sure no one saw her take them from her purse. She made a game of it. She called it circling the airport. If you think this was my mother, then I dare you to prove it. You've never actually seen her, not even close. And the last poem I'll read is called Eminent Domain. And where I'm from, and down in Coos Bay, they've been trying to get a liquid natural gas pipeline punched through my parents' property, which so far hasn't happened. So this is a preoccupation of mine across a few books. Eminent Domain. I'm worthless at sharpening a chainsaw, even with a vise and a good file. My cuts smoke and pull hard to the left. I thinned the property. The county says we need papers for our spring water, tests and permits. The state says get a lawyer. The stumps I leave behind are shaped like tire chocks. Not even the drunkest ghost will stop to tie his shoe on them. When the pipeline surveyors trespass, I slash their tires. I paint my face and disappear into the woods. I fire rock salt through the trees. We tell the deputy we haven't seen shit. The moon's behind on its rent. It hasn't opened its mail in a year. As soon as the rain comes, we'll burn our brush in the field. There are so many arguments against us, and no map to carry the runoff of our voices. Not a line, not a name, not a legend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for such vibrant poetry. Wonderful to hear you again. And so we'll now entertain questions. So far, I don't see any yet from our audience. So Wendy, you could just kind of maybe check in every now and then and see if anything's coming in.
I will.
But I'm going to start myself with, I want to first ask Annie, I know that you've made creative nonfiction one of your genres, and yet you're engaged in fiction right now too with a novel. So what differences do you experience when you approach creative nonfiction as separate from approaching fiction, or is it very similar process?
It's a very similar process, although of course novels are so much longer. All of my nonfiction is short. It's short work, and that's a very good question. I guess the biggest difference is in nonfiction. Of course, you're supposed to be telling the truth, sticking to the facts as much as possible, and that's not easy for me because I tend to treat facts with irreverence.
Yeah.
But there is a difference, a distinct difference between fiction and nonfiction that you can't violate that. And so, but the biggest difference I think for me is the difference in length. I can do a nonfiction piece in so much less time. Novels take me. I'm a glacier when it comes to fiction. As I was telling Hank earlier, I've got one novel that I've been working on for 14 years and counting, and it's not done yet. So I enjoy the short work as a break from that, for sure. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me that you started it that far back. That sounds about right to me too.
Does it?
Michael, I've always been struck by your poetry, and that it uses the small town as kind of a center. What do you find is particularly stimulating about that, in terms of your writing?
I think it's just by consequence. I was raised in the, outside of Coos Bay in the woods, and as some might say, in the middle of nowhere, and that's where my imagination was formed, around those local communities and families, where my vocabulary comes from, and
Mm-hmm.
I think for me anyway, I'm so tied to those early formative experiences and memories that when I write, I just tend to go to that space, and as it happens, it's
Mhm.
the rural Oregon mostly.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I can see that happening. Is there any stimulus in particular about it being remote? I mean, is the remoteness an attractive part of it in any way? Or
When I started writing, I like everyone, I think I wanted to be another person with different experiences, and I dreamed about being Lorca, imagining him in New York, writing code in New York, and I think once I read poets like Neruda, who could look at the commonplace and see its mystical stuff just in ordinary objects and folks going to work and the landscape, I felt permitted to look at my own life in that way. So I don't know if being alone is a romantic choice for my writing, but I just grew up without people, and I was by myself so much of the time with my sister, out in the woods, and I just go back to that place of just being isolated.
Mhm.
And most of my work is like a guy alone out in the rural landscape, and it's just kind of a default setting.
Okay, great. Annie, in your the piece that you read, the narrator's approaching family secrets. Did you find that a difficult subject to approach, or?
Do you know, I did in one way, and it's the answer is yes and no. I I had to write about it. It was just like an imperative. I had to write about it. It was part of processing it. And I know that writing can be therapeutic, and in my case, in that,
Right.
absolutely was. But I have to be careful. It is why I use a pseudonym. Annie Sheppard is not my name, and it's because I have living family who would be hurt, and it would do damage to our family as such as it is, that I'm not willing to do. So I chose to protect myself and them in that way, and then I can tell the truth.
Right.
And so that was how I kind of walked that line, which is, not an easy line to walk.
Sure.
But I didn't really feel like I had a choice. Because
Right.
in terms of telling it, it needed to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of the power of the writing too.
Yeah.
Across with that for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Henry, I'm just going to interrupt briefly. For some reason, we can't see the questions on our end, but there are questions people are asking and wonderful comments on YouTube. So
great.
I have pasted them into our private chat, so you can
Oh, good.
the spacing between the person who's asking and the first word isn't good. So
Great. I visited our website and I couldn't see it either. So, okay. Thank you. Okay, we have. Let's see. Let's take one from Judith Montgomery. Annie, can you tell us something about this terrific essay, Develop Birds First, Then Father? When did the messenger god strand weave in?
Good question. Weirdly, they kind of happened in a parallel way. I was learning I was a beginning birder as my dad was failing, and as he failed, he started talking about all the things he'd done, and so I was learning about birds, and I was learning about my family, a lot of things that I didn't know at the same time, and so they were sort of naturally linked in my mind and my imagination. And so I can't say one or the other came first. I think they came together in some ways. But there was also this uncertainty. There's a theme of uncertainty in the essay, that I've always felt about my dad. I knew from age 20 that he had molested one of my sisters. I didn't believe her. And so, or I wasn't sure. I was unsure. It wasn't that I didn't believe her, it's that I didn't want to, that thing. And so that's part of the essay too, is just how much uncertainty you can bear and how much you
Mhm.
have to live with it. And
Yeah.
and then to have it turn out that she was right and I had to, digest that was a lot of what was happening there.
Right.
And then the messenger from God thing was just serendipitous. I happened to read a book called Sightings by Sam Keane, and he was talking about birds, and he was the one that dropped that little nugget in my lap at just the right time. And I just ran with it. It was great.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Question from Alan Contreras. Mike, what differences do you find in the culture and landscape around Moscow relative to Coos County? Will we see that new region in your future work?
Thanks, Alan. I don't know. I mean, when I read about Coos Bay, it's just as imaginary as it is documentary for me. And when I write about Idaho, I feel like I'm really writing about Coos Bay. In a way, it's just my myopia. I was invited for no reason I can figure out to contribute to an anthology of animal poems about the Cascadia region. And I was so taken aback because everything to me is ornamental and not really real. Like you've got deer and horses and things, but I don't think of them as that. I think of them as images. And so I don't really have this sounds ridiculous, but I don't really have a sense of geography that I feel drawn to write about. I just write about images, and those I think happen to be from my childhood. But it's convenient that I write about rural America and have a job in a very rural part of the country. There's a lot. I mean, you can drive out for 5 minutes and be in the middle of nowhere. And
I remember, going out on the pea fields and being chased by spray planes and all kinds of things that always will make me. Also, along that Stagecoach Road where the farmhouses burned down but left the wild roses. Anyway, I'll get off on Moscow and I'll never come back. So anyway, thanks, Michael. A follow-up question for you from Emily Reed. What do you consider when choosing a form and structure for your work, like questions or one-sentence lines?
Well, I have a pretty unglamorous answer for both of those. The one-sentence line I borrowed from Larry Brown, the great fiction writer, who wrote a book called Facing the Music. And in it, he's got this glorious short story called Boy and Dog. And every paragraph is about 6 words, and it's one sentence. And I was so taken by how great it was and how impossible that seemed to do that I thought I would just try to make poems in the same way. Constriction, I'm not a formal writer, but that layer of constraint was so fun, and I had to be so inventive, and it got me to kind of divorce myself from my lazy habits a bit in my default settings, and it was quite fun. And the question book came just through reading also, and one of Pablo Neruda's posthumous books is the Book of Questions, and all of his sentences are questions. And again, it was just a curiosity thing. Like, God, what a level of constraint! And what started out as just a notebook project turned into a book, just for my own fun. That's the right word. But I'm not usually a formal writer or a structural one on purpose, but I was in these 2 books, and I had a great time doing it. And it was nice to have to look at myself in a fun mirror.
Great. Just a couple comments here. Lovely work from both writers. Thank you. Comment here from Ellen Contreras. Annie's image of the holiness of the human eye gazing back from the hummingbird is extraordinary, wonderful. Great. Wendy, any other questions that have come out from the group? If not, I'm going to round it up with maybe one question for each of them from me.
No others that I can see, so.
Okay, so I guess, final question. I think in the novel that you're writing in and now, Annie, are some of the themes in the piece that you read to us being extended in that novel, or is this a completely different tack?
Yep, absolutely. Same themes.
Okay.
No, actually, I have to backtrack a little on that. Yes, I have a character in the novel who's a father who has done similar things to his daughter that my father did, but I don't. I go a different direction than birds.
Okay.
I've invented a wildflower instead.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Right.
And Michael, this is just kind of a follow-up to the previous question you received, but what was fascinating to you about the question, Mark?
Oh, that it is about uncertainty, and it's this was sort of a synchronous reading experience because people seem to be fairly certain about a lot of things, politically and morally, that I think is pretty anti-artistic. It was very poignant to read a book powered only by questions, and a book written by someone who was dying himself. One of the last books Neruda wrote when he's dying of cancer. And I loved thinking about a writer of that power ending his life by asking questions, not by being certain. There's a lot of sort of spiritual or moralistic allure, unknowing, that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Keats, who makes this kind of shadow in your work, his term negative capability. I was thinking of that too.
Sure.
Well, thank you both for great readings and great
There
response.
is one last question that popped in.
Yes.
So, Ingrid Went wants to know if it's possible to get Annie's essay in print or online.
Yes.
That's
Here,
it.
I'll make a plug. Tsunami Books can order the Pushcart Prize. It's in. Am I holding that up where you can see it? It's in the Pushcart Prize XLV. That essay is in it, and lots of other great stuff. Oh boy, there's some good work in that anthology. And Tsunami, they will order that for you. You can get it online, but I encourage you to buy it from Tsunami.
Thank you. Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, I just want to thank our readers again. Also want to remind people that we will be here again the third Tuesday of the month, this time in November. And that will be a reading which will feature the series Pacific Northwest Poetry Series. And both of the readers that will be coming for us have had the honor of being included in it. John Whitty for Disquiet, and Nance Van Winkle for Pacific Walkers and No Starling. And then her third collection, which is going to be featured in the reading, The Many Beds of Martha Washington, are being highlighted as a kind of book launch at this time. And Christopher Howell, who is the poet and director of Lynx House Press, will be present too to entertain questions and also perhaps answer them as well. So we'll have a great reading ahead of us as well. So thank you again, and thank you, Wendy, for again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.